From the USA to Merseyside and beyond, welcome to the Blue Frontier. Insightful Everton analysis for every Blue with James Boyman, Ryan Williams, and Shan.
Ladies and gentlemen, Toffees, welcome back to another episode of the Blue Frontier. James here today, joined by Shan following Leeds 1, Everton 0, first match of the season, first post-match pod of the new season, and Everton are much the same. 4 years in a row now without Everton winning a game in the month of August after a controversial penalty was awarded from James Tarkowski's blocked shot. We'll, of course, get into that controversy later. With the win at Elland Road, Leeds become the first championship winner since 07-08 to win their opening fixture. Sunderland was the last one. Previous 17 championship winners, 5 draws, 12 losses. Everton that, if I've ever seen it. Before we get into the episode, just a reminder that if you enjoy the show, please leave us a rating and review on your podcast platform of choice. We really appreciate it, even though the results are not off to a flying start. We are off to a flying start this season on the Blue Frontier. Leave us a rating and review. Follow us on socials. Links in the description of this episode, linktr.ee/thebluefrontier. Join our Discord as well, and we'll get into it with the summary quotes from our Discord today. I chose them, starting with Bluest 192, high-profile insider, our resident high-profile insider and French football expert, with a simple, we're back, and we are certainly back in a big way. I then went on a little bit of a more serious note, Mark, Southeast Michigan Toffee, who said, not a good start to either the match or the season. Injuries showed our lack of depth, but a healthy Everton are better than what Leeds showed today. We hope for more signings, but either way, 37 more to go. Everyone take a deep breath and step down from the ledge. We will be okay. I think that's some important perspective because it's very easy after what we saw today to get real fired up as a continuation of seasons past, but we'll try not to do that too much today, as hard as it may be. Shan, hit us with some score predictions.
Yeah, and to speak about score predictions, thanks, James. Just want to put it out there, as you saw from the Blue Frontier account today, we really want all of your predictions. So please, if there's any reason to join the Discord, it's to be with your fellow Blues and provide score predictions. Last year's winner, Sunwave Cat, got a hat from us, a Blue Frontier hat. There's not many out there, so he is definitely one of the lucky few. And for us, it's just a great way to stay engaged and whatnot. And we might have some wrinkles that we haven't talked about yet to put a little bit more detail and fun in it. But in terms of today's predictions, a few correct. It would be Schmub, Detour 28, Jeremiah Baker, and Pat Vandenhow. Congratulations on getting a score prediction correct. First one of the season. Hate that it was correct, but it is what it is, and great job, guys. Going into the lineups, I'm going to start with Leeds lineup. So Leeds look to be in a 4-3-3. A few of the new additions this summer that they had made their debuts. Lucas Perry, of course, replacing Ilian Millier. That's a massive upgrade for them. Gabriel Gudmundsson at left back, somebody that we kind of talked about in terms of the squad assessment for potential target. So good business from there. And one of my favorite players of kind of the season so far in terms of the offseason transfers, Anton Stock, getting their debuts this summer. One miss was Jaka Bajol, the big center back from Udinese. He had a red card accumulation from his time there, so he misses his chance to start. But pretty familiar lineup for Daniel Farke coming back to the Premier League. Jayden Bogle and Joe Rodon and Pascal Strike kind of make that back four. So very familiar faces to not only the Premier League, but of course Leeds championship season last year. And then you look at that midfield, it kind of, was transitioning a bit from a 4-2-3-1 to a 4-3-3, but really it was stock. Al Tanaka, who I think is another guy that I'm very intrigued to watch, had a great championship season for them. Very good bit of business. I believe it was £3 to £4 million that they got him, or euros. And you have Ethan Ampadu, who of course most folks know gives Ryan headaches at night. Just the typical midfielder. So those three would play the midfield, and then of course that front three, Joel Piroe, Wilfred Nanto, and then Daniel James. So of course outside of Piroe, Premier League knows those Daniel James and Wilfred Nanto. Of course, Everton fans know him so well. Not very many players want to demand to come to Everton, especially last season. Of course, it didn't happen, and he's got reintegrated to the side. But one of those lineups where on paper doesn't look too threatening, but I think that midfield, and we'll get to it in key matchups, is very mobile as well as very tall and strong. So, James, I'll hand it to you for the Everton lineup.
Yeah, we led with the Leeds lineup, an interesting one. Obviously newly promoted. They've done some decent business this summer, and I think it was really put on blast today, the business that Everton must do in the last 2 weeks of the transfer window. Not only did you kind of had everything coming to a head, right? You had the lack of depth and lack of addressing the key problems that we highlighted months ago at this point, combined with the threadbare nature of the existing personnel when Asnu supposedly went down. We think it's with an injury very shortly before pre-match, and just put kind of everything on blast. Of course, Beto starting up top in the number 9. Dewsbury Hall making his full Everton debut at that sort of second striker, more of a number 10 role. Iliman Ndiaye starting on the left. Alcaraz, Charlie on the right. They would switch at some point in the first half. And then you have the midfield pairing behind them of Idrissa Gueye and Tim Irabunum, which, again, Tim Irabunum's a player who should just not be anywhere near this Everton squad, unfortunately. No disrespect to him, but he must play because there is nobody else. And then the fullbacks, what else needs to be said? James Garner shockingly decided to be put at left back alongside Michael Keane and James Tarkowski. Again, Michael Keane still in the team. Jake O'Brien, center back, playing right back. And Jordan Pickford as the spine of the team. And look, there's some huge holes in this team. You got Alcaraz playing out of position, James Garner playing out of position, a midfield between Ghana and Tim that is just really kind of disorganized in a lot of really bad ways. Beto extremely isolated up top. But before we get into the match itself and those issues that were put on full display in the first half, I think there were some, just talking about those lineups, some key matchups that were of interest going into the match.
Yeah, James, it was just so hard to get distracted with how many out-of-position players we had, because that gets us to our first matchup, and that's Daniel James and Wilfred Nanto versus the wingbacks, right? Or let's just say left back and right back in this case, because we didn't play back 3. So, of course, fun start to the season with James Garner having to play left back. I'm sure that was in the team talk and plan throughout the week, right? And Everton that they get a left back, and he is injured somehow before the first game of the season. So, of course, Jake O'Brien playing out of position, and, of course, that's been a theme for him with Everton, facing both a pacey winger in James Garner's case and Daniel James. So was curious to kind of see how that matchup would play. And then, of course, you have Wilfred Nanto, who I think might be a foot less taller than Jake O'Brien. So watching them stand next to each other was quite interesting. Of course, I would say the actual challenges that both players will face this season, definitely not the highest. But I think just in terms of creativity with Nanto, that was somebody who I think if there was anybody to give us problems today, I would have expected it to be him. And then, of course, the next battle, which I think you illustrated so well, is that midfield, right? Because it's essentially Ghana and Tim, who's just kind of running with no purpose. He's running. There is a purpose. I just don't think he knows what it is. Versus Anton Stock, Al Tanaka, and Ethan Ampadu, right? So it's just, some athletes in there as well as size. And I think we saw today, especially in terms of the match, how important a strong midfield is, especially when you think of just really understanding the pulse of the match and being able to control the game. And that will get us to our timeline.
Yeah, and I think, look, I'm inclined to try to give Moyes the benefit of the doubt here, because if you think about, okay, if Asnu is fit, we know Mikolenko's still hurt. So if Asnu is able to start, then you probably put Garner alongside Idrissa Gueye, which I don't think is that much better, but I do think it's better and provides a little bit more support. Into the timeline, the first half, wow, there were not many super memorable moments other than just kind of a constant barrage of Leeds attacking and Everton futilely trying to keep them at bay. I think the real first major close goal-scoring opportunity that got Elland Road fired up. And I'll also say, this is a tough atmosphere. They're promoted. Leeds fans are nuts. Everyone knows it. It's a difficult place to go play. So I think the players were caught out a little bit and looked a little reserved and uncomfortable, partially due to the atmosphere, partially due to the disruption to the team. But Nanto plays a really nice ball on the ground from like 30 yards out in Peru. Gets on the end of it at like the edge of the 6, corner of the 6. Pickford has to come out and block it. Goes out for a corner. That was the first really good chance. And they would have a number of good chances as the first half wore on, but none that were crazy threatening. It was just kind of, it constantly felt like Everton were on the back foot, and anytime we even got any ball movement forward, Leeds were able to close down, they were able to move, they were able to shift, and really shut out any space that we would have. And, of course, that leads to a first half in which Everton managed 0 shots on target. 138 accurate passes to 254 for Leeds. Leeds had 6 corners, so they were just all 12 shots. Again, only 1 on target, so nothing crazy threatening. 0.73 XG they accumulated on 12 shots. So that's halfway decent. And even some of the kind of higher XG opportunities they got, really, when you watch it back, weren't all that great, and they didn't look super threatening. But Everton, 7 for 29 in long balls, where Leeds were 15 for 28. Everton 0 for 1 in crosses, Leeds 4 for 18. So while Leeds were by no means great, I just think how poor Everton were really made them look a lot better than their actual performance. We were just so inept.
And so much of it was unforced, right? I mean, you think of Jordan Pickford, right, and how much time he had on some of the just time with the ball and just kicking it out of bounds. I think you saw with how strong the press was from Leeds to start the game, how that kind of forced some of our guys. And I'd rather them be, of course, safe than sorry, like Michael Keane, to just kind of nail it out of bounds or whatnot. So it doesn't surprise me on the numbers. I give us credit defending the corners well, right? Because when you have 6 corners, and I think 5 of those were in the first 15 minutes, I mean, that's a pretty big onslaught. And as you said, James, I mean, they're back in the Premier League. I think the environment on a Monday night, right, is rocking and rolling. And they have a lot of new additions, so they want to make their mark in terms of this team and staying up. But it's as lackluster as you can kind of get from Everton. But I don't think we should be too surprised given the lineup.
No, absolutely not. I mean, you look at it, and I think the tactical approach was abandoned rather quickly because you saw kind of a intent to try to play out from the back from Everton early on, and you're trying to lure their press forward, you're trying to bypass it, but it very quickly became clear that like this is just not the players that you need to try to dictate that style of play. I mean, Ghana is a decent possession player, but you had Ndiaye and Alcaraz having to drop so deep to receive the ball. There's no one in front of them. Beto completely isolated, and no, he didn't have the best game, but he was on an island, a theme that has been a part of this pod in multiple iterations now, multiple years. And Dewsbury Hall will add some quality in possession, but just really between the 3 of Dewsbury Hall, Ghana, and Tim, no organization, didn't really seem to be clear on the roles that they were supposed to fill, the spaces they were supposed to occupy. And as a result, you just saw Everton launching it long. And when we got the ball forward, there's really no movement in the final third to create anything. So inevitably, it would just make its way back to the feet of Michael Keane or James Tarkowski, and then back to Jordan Pickford to try to build up from the back again. So it just felt like kind of banging your head on the wall, exercise in futility for certainly the first 45 minutes. And I think that really established and told David Moyes that something needed to change in the second half.
Yeah, and I think we saw that with Kieran Dewsbury Hall essentially kind of, moving back a little bit just to, I think, give us some sort of possession in the midfield, right? Because, of course, Ghana was doing, I think, his best. But outside of that, I mean, it just truly, like as you said, ended up just being a very pass-back friendly team that I think at a certain point you were just wondering if they were going to get in the opposition's box, would Leeds stop us or would we stop ourselves, right? So starting with the second half, going into the 53rd minute, Ndiaye, of course, in typical fashion, with 3 defenders on him on the edge of the box, gets through, lays it off for Ghana, goes way over. First one of the year, I'm glad he got it out.
Getting it out of the way early, appreciate that from Ghana. And that was Ndiaye all day. I mean, Leeds were able to just kind of drape guys all over him, and he was trying his best to try to dribble out of it, maybe not always super well advised. I think he probably could have tried to move the ball, pass it a little bit more frequently, but you can tell he really wants to try to get the ball forward, and he's not getting the ball in super dangerous positions or isn't always able to. And when he does, there's a ton of guys all over him because he's very clearly the dangerous player in this situation. Just a minute later, kind of goes the other end. Tanaka finding Dan James with a nice through ball down the wing into space. Crosses it into Nanto, who takes a really good first touch, kind of away from the defender, and then has to rotate his body to get a shot off, but it hits side net. So good adjustment, but not quite able to get it on target. Really just moving quickly here. In the 67th minute, Daniel Farka has seen enough. Brings on Brendan Aronson for Wilfred Nanto. Nanto wasn't super impactful today. Took some shots from distance, some dribbles, but really wasn't able to get going in a rhythm, I don't think. And I think Jake O'Brien deserves a little bit of credit for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we got the best version of Nanto for Everton's sake, because I felt like he was a bit wasteful. And for a guy that I think gives a lot more than what he did today, yeah, I would agree with you, James. Credit to Jake O'Brien, but even there was that shot on the top of the box, right, where he hits right at Jordan Pickford. Just kind of one of those where I think on another day they get a lot more from him. But that also brings us to the 71st minute where Jack Grealish makes his debut, and I loved the amount of comments in the Discord in regards to Tim coming off and saying that they haven't seen a bigger upgrade in that duo. So that was fun. And then, of course, the 78th minute, there's a triple sub for Leeds. Of course, Medja, Jack, Harrison, and Gruev for Ampadu, Dan James, and Puro. So I think for Daniel Farka, I think he's kind of wanted to refresh things as well. Understand that with the press, just the, I think, intensity that they were putting, trying to go for the win.
Yeah, and also, again, just highlights the depth. I mean, Grealish on for Irabunum, and Jack kind of goes out on the left, and players shift around. It's just really awkward for Everton. You don't really have like for like subs to make kind of quality changes, and you're just searching for an answer. You hope to bring Jack in, and he does all right. He wins that early free kick very quickly, and he has some actually pretty decent moves with the ball and finding players, but there's very simple stuff today from Everton. Like even the passes around the back did not look cohesive or smooth. It was awkward, players taking their first touch into space, and Jack Grealish certainly brings that individual quality. And we talked about him on the last pod at the end before he had officially signed. He's officially here, and we're going to just make of that what we will as the season unfolds. Wasn't surprised to see him start on the bench. I know a lot of people might have expected him to go straight in, but Irabunum, not his best day. He's just not quite ready for this level, if I'm being totally honest. I think if there were any semblance of coherence to Everton's strategy, he'd be out on loan by the end of the window. So I certainly hope for his sake and for Everton's that's the case. And then we're not relying on him all season. But Grealish comes in, as you said. And really the big moment, one of the big moments, the big moment of this match, is 3 minutes after the triple sub for Leeds. And it starts with Everton in the final third, and it ends in catastrophe on the other end. It's Ndiaye dribbling, taking on both Goodmanson and Harrison. He splits them both beautifully, but goes down. I don't think it's a foul here, and Ndiaye I don't think did either. But it's a no call in either case. And then Everton keep possession, but it goes from Tarkowski, who kind of gets the loose ball, to Garner, back to Michael Keane, probably 10 yards back, and then straight back to Pickford. Pickford tries to one-touch it to Alcaraz, who's here dropping deep to try to receive the ball just to get anything going forward. Charlie tries to take a cute little touch and turn by the defender coming onto him. He slips and gives it away. Leeds are in. Harrison's on it. Passes to Stock. Shot goes off Tarkowski. Kavanagh points to the spot. And on initial watch, it does look like Tark's arm is slightly away from his body. On subsequent watches, the controversy deepens, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the Premier League did not shy away from giving us controversy in the first match of the season. And I think, as you mentioned, James, just felt very unfortunate too. I think Tark, of course, it's just a tough position to be in, right? Ball's coming at you upon a little bit of a deflection too. As they mentioned in the commentary, and I know you're going to talk about the actual rule book, it's the lean that really, I think, pushed it over the edge. And it just felt very unfortunate because on a day where even as lethargic as we were playing, I didn't see Leeds scoring from open play or even a corner, right? Just because of how well we were defending those.
Yeah, and what's your thought, Sean, when you first see it and you see the replays and really the what's interesting is the way the call is kind of delayed, and it's apparently the linesman who gives the call initially. So Kavanaugh kind of looks to the linesman awards it. Linesman did not have a good day. I thought that was a ridiculous call because his arm is against his body. He's moving it towards his body as the ball hits it, but he's also moving his body to try to hit the ball with his chest. I thought it's one of those, what is he supposed to do with his arm there? You can't not have an arm. So it's about as close to your body as you could possibly expect it to be. So how is it a handball? That's my thought process as I'm watching it.
Yeah, I mean, the linesman today was by far the worst performer today. He wasn't on planet Earth, I could tell you that much. It's just some of the calls, the out-of-bounds call that we did not talk about earlier, I mean, was just absolutely egregious how he does not see that. And then, of course, as Tark mentioned in his post-game interview, right, the linesman is well beyond the vision of really kind of even seeing that. And so for him to make that call, I think is just kind of ridiculous. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. I thought, as you mentioned, I think it was incredibly harsh, given that I think Tark, there's really not much he could have done in that scenario. Do I see the argument in regards to the lean? Yes. But I will say this, I mean, they are setting a standard, so I'm curious to see as the season goes on, right, these situations happen and what the calls are.
Yeah, I went to look at some of the writing of the rules, the verbatim laws of the game to try to make sense of this one, because it's, when you watch this game, there's stuff you see and you just kind of have a gut reaction to it, like clear handball, clearly not a handball. And when defenders have to have their arms to their sides, I just think you have to give them the benefit of the doubt. However, the Premier League put out, it's not the official handbook, but they put out basically a slide deck clarifying some rules. And there's a few bullet points that I thought might be beneficial to kind of talk about. So, principles of a handball, one of the bullet points is players are not expected to move with their arms by their side or behind their back. Also that hand and arm position should be judged in relation to body movement in that particular situation. But then this is where I think you kind of get into some trouble in relation to this play. A very clear deflection that results in a significant change in trajectory of the ball should carry greater weight than arm position when considering a handball offense. To me, that's kind of the writing on the wall. It's a clear block. He's moving toward the ball. He's tucking his arm, but it does hit his arm. I don't think there's really any dispute of that. And the arm does make his body bigger. So you could say it's justified. You could say it's not. The real thing that you hit on, Sean, is they've set a precedent. Will they consistently enforce that precedent? Extremely unlikely, because they never do. And that's what makes people so frustrated. It's like, okay, well, if this is a handball, then when the exact same play happens to Everton, inevitably, 3 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever it may be, then we should get the call. What we've seen in the past is way clearer handballs than this go completely ignored or overruled, given and overruled. There's just no consistent application of it. And it's a really hard thing. It's a really hard rule to enforce. You can make it as black and white as you possibly want. There's still going to be gray area. There's still going to be debate. I just want to see some consistency. And we don't get it here. And Leeds, it makes a difference in the game. Because as you said, they were threatening. They were in dangerous areas, but they really weren't creating huge, huge chances. And then you just kind of hand them this one on a silver platter. And they, of course, finish it. And it's a well-taken penalty, sure. It's very well taken. Pickford guesses right. He looks at his water bottle. He guesses right, but it's perfectly placed in the bottom corner, low. Like, there's not really nothing he could do about it. So it's well taken, and it makes the difference in the end. And then you force Everton into a position where now you have to throw everything and just push forward. And so Moyes puts on Tierno Barry for, again, his full Everton debut, takes off Alcaraz, who I don't think had a great game, playing out of position again. And we do have maybe one really good chance trying to instigate some chaos. Grealish wins a free kick, as he does with a classic Jack Grealish play, just kind of scoots by the defender, gets a clip on the ankle, feels the contact, flops, and we get the free kick. The ball bounces in. Keane tries to lay it off to Beto, kind of in a cluster. Doesn't really work. It comes back out to Grealish. He hits it on the ground. It's a little bit of chaos. Ndiaye has it. He lays it off to Garner. Cross flicked. It's put into Beto. He flicks it, and Tark is there. Almost a redemption moment. But it takes a slight deflection after Beto hits it, and Tark kind of awkwardly can't readjust in time and heads it over. I don't know. I mean, Barry coming on, good to see. Big body, big presence, but very desperate from Everton in the closing stages.
Yeah, it just felt like we were in cruise control the whole match, right? Like we didn't have a second gear. And I thought, for a while, just in terms of the lack of counterattacks, right, that we were kind of putting just as we'd go front to back really quickly, that we were playing for a draw, because I think David Moyes, to some extent, was worried about them on the counter, right? Because that just felt like the only way that they were going to score, and that's eventually how they did, just simply on a giveaway from Charlie that just kind of ends up being a tough call on our end. And it's just a very slow start for a club that just knows slow starts very well in recent memory.
Yeah, and you just throw everything at it at the end, but it's always hard to do that. Leeds could shut up shop. We get 7 minutes of stoppage time, but it's not enough for us to really muster much of note. But I do think we do have to say that the second half markedly better than the first half in terms of cohesion. It's still not great, but it was clearly better in a lot of ways. I still think this team needs a number of players, which we'll talk about in the kind of the summary, and just needs more time together and really more instruction, especially if we're going to be stuck with a James Garner at left back, which I hope we're not for an extended period of time. But the midfield in particular is still just a really big concern for me. I think you need, I just don't see how you can get by with the options that we have right now. You could say maybe you drop Dewsbury Hall back and you maybe push Irabunam out, but I just don't think he can really play alongside Ghana. You just need that rock in the midfield who can really stuff anything out coming the other way and allow those other guys the freedom to occupy space, to get forward, to disrupt, and we did not have that today. And, when the manager has to kind of throw the written-up game plan into the paper shredder 25 minutes, 30 minutes into the match, I think it says a lot. It's a lot of quick pivots with the personnel, but really discouraging. I will take some encouragement from the second half. But to get into some of the high-level numbers, I mean, Leeds, 52% of their attack came down the left-hand side today. That was largely through Nanto, but then, of course, Aronson later on. Everton pretty balanced, but ineffective across the board. Shots, we talked about Leeds, not having a ton of great chances. That said, 57% of their shots did come from inside the 18, 19% inside the 6, in fact. So they had decent volume, but none of them felt really clear-cut or all that great. Other numbers from the second half that maybe stood out to you, Shan?
I mean, I think for us, in terms of the XG, right, or the lack thereof from our end, 1.39 for Leeds, 0.8 for us, and I feel like the XG gods are being pretty generous in that number. Of course, 0.05 from open play, which I think for us is a massive concern. 0.48 for Leeds. So, of course, from an opposition perspective, you can handle that. In terms of set play, that's really where we got all of our XG, right? 0.76 of that 0.8, of course, comes from that. And then you look at just kind of on target, 0.87, and of course a ton of that comes from the penalty. So let's not kind of dismiss that. And then 0.1 for us. But just, it just was one of those situations where it just felt like, as I said before, in cruise control. I mean, 227 passes, so much of them were just back, in our half. And so it just is a tough day. Understand the environment that we're in, and just trying to be somewhat conservative. But at the same time, I think we expected a lot more.
We did. I think one number that I think illustrates that if you're looking for positives here, and I am desperately looking for positives, first half, Leeds had 17 touches in our penalty area. We had 2 touches in theirs. You look at the second half, a little bit more balanced. They had 11. We had 12. On top of that, you mentioned the possession. We did have a little bit more possession. And they didn't take the lead until late, so we were, a lot of that is in our own half, but still 89 passes in their half. 11 accurate long balls compared to the putrid number we had in the first half. 4 accurate crosses. I mean, that's really grasping at straws here, but for a first game of the season in which you're looking at a super disjointed lineup, I think we are looking for that pretty desperately right now. And in the same vein, we talk about good performances. Tough choices today, Sean. I'll let you go with your selection first. It was, not an easy group to pick from today.
Yeah, not many people raising their hand from Everton today to be our good performers. So I was a little bit grasping at straws on this one, so don't throw too many tomatoes at me, good old Everton faithful. I picked James Garner, 86.8% pass accuracy on 53 passes, 2 for 5 on long balls, 2 tackles, 1 interception, 2 clearances, 1 block shots. I thought he did pretty well on Daniel James, all things considered, right? To find out you're essentially the left back, probably an hour or so before the games start. It's a thankless job to be out of position, and it's just, something that is all too well familiar with so many of our players of our club. And of course, James has played plenty of positions for Everton, but I thought he did a good job, all things considered, and certainly was not one of the reasons that we lost today.
We've had a lot of dialogue about James Garner as a potential right back. We've never once talked about him as a potential left back. It is like a rite of passage for a fringe first-team player at Everton to have to play fullback, the opposite side of footed, right? We've no left-footed players, and so we get a right-footed player at left back, and I think you saw the result. But it went about as well as you could expect it to be honest. And I think you're right to say, pat on the back for being the guy to step up and do the thankless job. And I don't think Dan James is some super player either, but he did a decent job on shutting him down. My choice, James Tarkowski, I guess. Reluctantly, he is very unlucky on the handball. I don't really fault him for that. He did lead the team in touches with 83. He was 4 for 11 in long balls, so just shy of 50% or a little bit shy of 50%. He was 2 for 2 in tackles. He had 9 clearances, 5 for 6 in aerial duels, only 3 for 8 in ground duels overall. But for a player who I think obviously benefits tremendously from someone like Jared Branthwaite alongside of him, you put Michael Keane out there. Keane was not horrendous today, didn't score an own goal, so we'll take that as a positive. He came close. He did come close a couple of times, but he did not. That partnership is just nowhere near the level that we need to be at. So I'll give Tark credit for kind of holding it down as much as possible. And like you said, like we talked about throughout this episode, they didn't have a ton of super threatening chances. That really felt like we were under a ton of pressure. And for a back line that is very much popsicle sticks and glue, I think that's something to maybe take as a slight positive.
For sure. And that kind of brings us, of course, to our great community and just some of the listener comments from today. I'll go first with Stephen Williams, at Steve M. Williams. Feels like another few games needlessly thrown away by not having a bit more of a balanced squad. The holes are obvious, need sorting. And then I'll go with the Beto Bugle and let you finish with the last comment, James. But the Beto Bugle, of course, Jackson. Left back issues for sure, but both of our left backs got injured, not really on the recruitment team. I totally agree. No right backs on the other hand. I think one quick thing to mention too, James. Interesting that Garner kind of got the left back spot and not Dwight, especially as you mentioned, such a kind of, we don't have many left footers in the squad, right? And of course for Dwight, I don't know if that's more of a vote of confidence on Jimmy, just with how much he's been playing, or maybe just a situation where it's just maybe he's just not as high on Dwight.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about Dwight as a left wing back as being a potentially interesting wrinkle in his development and trajectory at Everton. I do think as a straight up left back, he's not really that quick. He would have had a real hard time with Dan James, I think. Going forward, that does give us a little bit more oomph down that left-hand flank, but it's a good point. I think it's a fair point. It'd be a big ask. I think it's a big ask for anyone to play that far out of position. After seeing Garner today, I think for as long as both Mikolenko and Asnu are injured, we'll probably continue to see him there. I hope that that's not very long. But it is curious that Dwight isn't really getting the nod, and I wonder if that's indicative of any opinions of the manager that he might have towards him. Last comment we had from Nick Weinstein, 27. This result is more on the front office / transfer committee than it is the players. Garner out of position and bad. Debatable. We thought he did okay. J.O.B. can't serve a ball out of his natural position. Charlie needing to play right wing out of his natural position. Tim needing to start. Awful from CEO to the players on the pitch. Which I think kind of brings us to the overall discussion that has been bubbling under the surface of this entire post-match analysis. And really the meat of the conversation is it's 2 weeks left in the window, and we still haven't really addressed the positions of need. We're talking about our two of our flagship signings who are expected to come in and most immediately contribute in Dewsbury Hall and Jack Grealish. Barry, potentially, but more one for the future. Two players who, from what it sounds like, Grealish is expected to kind of play in the middle. I don't know what that means for Dewsbury Hall, but you spent a ton of money on somewhat redundant players and have not addressed critical needs of this team. And that was truly exposed today, and I think Nick points it out well. This is not really on the players. They're doing what is asked of them, and they're limited in what they can do. There was a whole to-do about this transfer committee and what an important, critical summer it was for Everton. It's been a few months. Those issues still, for the most part, remain. The main issues have not been addressed. And we've been very optimistic, or tried to be for the most part throughout the summer, of just be patient. By the end, we have to see where things land at the end of the window. And I still feel that way quite a bit, but I'm just starting to feel in the back of my head like, wow, we are really just going to totally blow this window, let half our squad go, and not replace or fill any of the positions of need. I'm trying not to spiral, but it's getting harder by the day.
Yeah, I mean, like you, James, I'm still very optimistic about just the overall team this year, but I think the committee deserves a good amount of criticism, especially when you kind of look at some of the deals that have been done this window. I think I agree, especially on something like, Kieran Dewsbury Hall, right? That deal was to be had, months ago, right? So to kind of have it, a week or so or two before the season, not ideal, but then also it makes you curious at this point, because I think how much money are they going to end up spending, when it's all said and done? And let's just say if we're kind of near the cap or whatnot, to kind of just address, none of the needs at this point. And I don't, the body of work in terms of the preseason as well as today, I think has been more than enough to show where the needs are. And I think especially too, you look at kind of the injuries that we have, how quickly the depth can go. And it's not like those options aren't out there, right? There's players that, in my opinion, that even the promoted teams have gotten that I thought would be good fits for Everton. So it's not, I would say, a Malik Fofana situation, right, where we're waiting kind of, for a player to kind of make a decision at the end of the window. It's not like that for every position. So a lot of criticism, I think, justly at this point, can go towards the board, but I am still in the wait and see, section, just because they could truly have a blinder, right, and get some players in that will fill those needs. But I think it's very evident after today, one, what those needs are and how much you limit the other players in the squad, such as Ndiaye, right, who essentially is going to get triple teamed if we throw that lineup out there again, right? It's just the cohesion offensively when you have like a Jack Grealish or whatnot gets completely nullified if you can't fill out the rest of the team.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I've seen a lot of people kind of say today that this performance will show the transfer committee how urgent the situation is. And if this is what it took for them to realize what the team needs were and the urgency with which they needed to be addressed, we're in big trouble. We're in huge trouble. These needs were identified by you, me, and Ryan months ago. Ryan works professionally in the game, but for seasons, some of these things have existed for years and years. So I'm just so baffled at how we have been unable to address them. It's not even like getting deals done, like the Dibbling deal. We've talked about that and the criticism, and I think he's a good player. But it's like a lack of agility with being able to move quickly or pivot quickly when things don't go our way. It's like we commit to a target, and then the saga kind of drags on in the case of Dibbling, and we're haggling over a few million here, sell-on clause percentage, what have you. And I'm not of the mindset that we should just pay them what they're asking for. Like, that's not a good approach either. You get in big trouble that way too. But you got to have a second, third, fourth option, and you've got to go to those, and I'm hoping that that's happening behind the scenes. We just don't have visibility into it. But to say, like, we don't, the view is that we don't need a right back, that's fine. Like, if Jake O'Brien is the one player in this squad that's playing out of position, I could probably get behind that. But you still need a center mid at the very least, probably 2 right wings, and time's running out. So I've adopted the moniker of the official vibes guy. I'm trying to keep the vibes positive. There is still 2 weeks. A lot can happen in 2 weeks. There's a lot of potential. I'm getting a little bit nervous, and I'm not overreacting to a single result. We've started seasons out very poorly for years now. It's a long, long season. I don't want to be reactionary in that way. It's just frustrating that we've had a lot of time, and I think we could have started the season off on the front foot, set up really well for success, and things just haven't quite gone our way. And it is frustrating not to feel like the club is still somewhat dysfunctional. And we had some questions about how the transfer committee would function and all those sorts of things. I'm sure some sort of post-mortem after this window might come out as to how well they've operated. That's enough of a rant from me. Trying to look at the silver lining. It is a lot of injuries. We're only going to be without Branthwaite for a few more weeks, around a month. We just got to get through this spell, get a couple guys healthy again, and make a couple of signings. And this is a dramatically different conversation in just a few weeks' time.
Yeah, I think one quick point on the target piece, James, it'll be interesting to look back a few months from now on those fees, right, for let's just say a Tyler Dibbling or whatnot. And if they could have saved, let's just say 10 million or a sell-on clause, and it might not just be Dibbling, it might be whoever comes in the door, right? They will deserve the credit, I think, at a certain point. But right now, I think in the immediacy, this team is just not, and I think Ryan said it, like this team is pretty similar to last year. It's not improved in terms of what was on the field, right? And I think for us, is very disappointing because it's just, you have so much excitement going into the summer, and then to kind of have, I think, the same old, whether it be getting deals done in time or whatnot, and then just committee dysfunction. I think folks, unfortunately, that have had those fears are valid at the moment.
Yeah. And look, we're sitting here, we're chatting. It's easy for us to say, do X, Y, Z. It's so simple. Just sign a right back, sign a right winger. Like, obviously, it's functionally much more complicated than that. And we also have a very limited view and knowledge of what's going on behind the scenes. But it just feels like, from what we know, that this was a golden opportunity for a group that was well prepared going into the summer to execute with precision and get deals done. Unfortunately, what's happened is it all happened very quickly before the window opened, that this whole group was assembled. So I don't think it's unreasonable to think that they weren't super prepared, and there's been difficulties with this committee approach. You're standing up an entirely new organization and expected to have to move quickly and do a lot of important business. And I don't think that's easy in any industry, much less one as crazy as football. So it's just head scratching. It is frustrating. Everton are about to, in just a few days, have their first official Premier League match at a new stadium under new ownership. And what a glorious occasion it could have been and still might be. But as it stands now, it's looking like it's going to be a tough first month or so of the season, just getting these new guys integrated and whoever else new might arrive. So holding out hope, trying to keep the vibes high. I still think we'll get a few more deals done before the window closes without a question. And if we don't, then this will be a depressing pod this season, but we're hoping for it not to be that. Anyway, Sean, I think we've beaten this into the ground enough. I think a lot of people are probably feeling the same. If you feel differently, if we're totally off base here, let us know. Reach out. If you're really optimistic, we want to hear from you, because I'd love to hear, and I know Shan, the conductor of the optimism train, is always looking for optimistic takes to bolster his point of view.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I'm still optimistic, but I am also realistic and can appreciate all the commentary in regards to just how this window's gone. But as we mentioned, we've kind of beaten this down as much as we can, going through our upcoming schedule. Of course, the Brighton match, so really excited for that. I think the vibes will truly be high, and I really hope that they get up for this one, similar to how the Leeds players got up for their game. And then at Wolves, I think that's a very winnable game. And then, of course, you go into the international break, right? So hopefully some integration for the squad. We'll play Aston Villa at home, and then, of course, the Merseyside derby at Anfield. I think one thing to also say, James, the broader conversation is we are not the only club also facing this, right? You've seen multiple managers throughout the Premier League season, Crystal Palace, Victor Pereira at Wolves. You have a few others, right? Marco Silva at Fulham, that have been very frustrated by their transfer business or lack thereof. So not to make excuses, right? Because that's not what we're doing. But I would just say in terms of the broader landscape, it's not only Everton that is struggling to do things, right? And it's no surprise to me that the promoted teams are putting their foot out there and spending money, right? Especially with the ownership groups of each of them. So in terms of our normal kind of programming, we are going to do the next match preview. It's not going to be Mansfield. It's going to be Brighton that we will do. And so just kind of some numbers for you to look at. Last season, Brighton finished 8th with 61 points. Of course, had a very kind of roller coaster of a season under Fabian Hürzeler. 10th in expected points, so 57.26, so that's a negative 3.74 to what they achieved. In terms of their result this season, of course, they tied Fulham 1-1 on a late equalizer by Rodrigo Muniz. So, of course, they want to probably see differently in regards to Hill Dickinson. But looking at kind of their team, it's going to be a much different assignments for a wing or left back, right back, with, of course, Kara Matoma and Minta, who will be much more concerning if Mikolenko is out, right? Because I have some trust in Miko doing a decent job on Yankuba. But, of course, if it's Jimmy Garner, Yankuba Minta is a lot better player than Daniel James, right? So that is something to look out for if we go with this formation. Maxim Decipher replaces Purvis Estupinian and is a really good get for Brighton. I think he's kind of their headline addition when you look at the guys that they added. Of course, had a massive spend last summer. Not as much this summer, but still have made some moves. His creativity and attacking ability will help Fabian Hürzeler. I kind of, as we do our PL preview, you'll see some of these kind of left backs that come into the league. There's some really good ones. Adrian Truffert, another one that comes to mind. Of course, Georgino Roter, former Leeds guy, replacing João Pedro, who left to Chelsea. I'd say that's a downgrade for them, and I think something that they're going to be looking to replace, is João Pedro was very, very good for Brighton. I think somebody that will be a handful for our center backs, but certainly am happy that he does not play for them anymore. And then, of course, I think the main talking point with Brighton this summer is Carlos Baliba. Took a massive step last season. Of course, linked to United. I think United will not be able to get him this season, but an absolute engine for them, I think, is a guy that will, if Brighton are to go into Europe, he will be a big part of it, and somebody that will absolutely kind of really control the midfield for them. And I'm not looking forward to that, of course, on Sunday. But that takes us into kind of the end of the pod. James, any final comments?
No, I think that's a really good summary of Brighton. Otherwise, Sean, I know you mentioned it a few seconds ago. We are planning to do a Premier League preview this week to release later this week. It's kind of tough to do a Premier League preview with the window overlapping the beginning of the season, because you kind of want to wait for business to be done, but then obviously matches, fixtures have started. But we will be doing that this week, and we'll allude to any potential rumors with teams and whatnot, and try to give you guys a comprehensive overview of the league as we head into the season. So really looking forward to that one, and hope that you'll tune in. Otherwise, Sean, I'll hand it back to you. Any final thoughts on this one?
No, I mean, tough day at the office, as we mentioned, James. I think it's not the most exciting start to the season. I think there's still a ton to be optimistic for. I look forward to what we can add in the window, because as you mentioned, I agree with you. I think there's going to be at least 2 to 3 additions, and I hope that 2 of those positions are filled, specifically center midfield, because as you saw today, it is badly needed, not only for our sanity, but Ghana's. Poor guy. So it's, but I'm really excited to be back. I mean, I think it's so exciting for the Premier League to be back. I can't state that enough. I'm really excited to spend the time these weekends enjoying the footy, and just hope that we can, really give a product this season, especially on the offensive side of the ball, that our fans could be proud of.
I'm manifesting now, but there will be an enjoyable Everton to watch this season. It might just take a few weeks. So I'm trying to manifest the good vibes. I don't
He'll
have my
pass the
pina
vibe check,
colada.
James.
I'm trying to pass the
I
vibe
agree,
check.
and you're gonna pass them.
Sean
I know
can
you will.
confirm I'm not wearing my Hawaiian shirt. I'm not sipping a pina colada, but that may come in the weeks ahead, so stay tuned. Otherwise, that's going to do it for us today, guys. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, leave us a rating and review on your podcast platform of choice. Follow us on socials. Reach out via email. Our email is also in the description, as well as all of the other links. So reach out with feedback. We'd love to hear from you. Join our Discord, all that good stuff. Otherwise, we'll be with you next time. Until then, up the Toffees.